Hi, I'm Adam, and this is Game Mechanics 101. Today we're going to cover deck building. Deck building is one of my favorite mechanics, mainly because of how the game changes throughout the entirety of the game and how every game usually feels pretty different from the last game that you played. For some of you, you might not know what deck building is, so let's go into that. So how does deck building actually work? Well, it's fairly simple. You start with a small deck of cards, usually about 10, 12, depending on the game that you are playing. And you start by drawing a small hand out of that deck. You are going to use that deck in different ways, but for the most part, you are going to use it to accomplish some sort of goal, either getting victory points or defeating monsters or something. And then you are usually able to also buy new cards to put into your deck. Now, whenever you buy a new card, you put it into your discard pile, and when you're done playing your hand, you put that whole hand into your discard pile. This is usually very confusing for people because they want to be able to play that card that they bought right away. But it's not the way deck building works. Deck building slowly changes your deck through the entire game. And so you're putting that into your discard pile, you put your whole hand into your discard pile, you put everything you bought into your discard pile, and then you're gonna start fresh with your draw deck. You take out of your draw deck again, and on your next turn you play through that again. When your deck is completely depleted, then you're going to take every card that you've bought and every card that you already had that's currently in your discard pile, and you're going to shuffle it and then put it back, and that becomes your new draw pile. So as the game goes on, your deck gets bigger. So it starts at a deck of 10 or so, but by the end of the game, you can have a deck of 15, 20, 30. Usually, strategically, it makes more sense to have your deck smaller for deck builders. This is a great way of studying probability because the more cards you have, the fuller your deck is, and so the less often you're going to draw those really good cards that you want to use. Games that use deck building as a major element, Dominion would be the first one that comes to most people's minds. Dominion is a great game, a great deck builder to start with because it just kind of gives you the basic of how all deck builders are going to work after that point. So with Dominion, the goal of the game is to gain victory points. And so by buying new cards, you can eventually get better money, so that way you can buy more expensive victory points, and at the end of the game, the person with the most victory points wins. It's pretty straightforward and simple. The problem with the victory point cards, though, is that they don't tend to do anything for you. So every time you draw them in your hand, out of your 5 or so cards that you have, if you have 2 or 3 victory point cards in your hand, well, you can't actually use them this turn. And so it slowly junks up your hand. Now, a lot of deck builders use this technique to kind of balance players out. This is going to slow you down, and it gives you something to kind of push and fight against. Thunderstone is another deck builder that uses this in a similar way. As you're going through Thunderstone, you are actually, with a bunch of other adventurers, going into a cave and fighting monsters, or a dungeon and fighting monsters. As you fight those monsters, some of them will give you a benefit later, whether it be money to be able to buy better stuff or better attack abilities. But for the most part, most of them are just going to junk up your hand. They just become cards that are useless until the end of the game when the scoring round comes around. Another one that uses this, or uses a way of junking up your hand, is trains. In trains, it's a little bit different. Every time you build something, whether it be a rail system or a station expansion, you have to add waste to your deck. Now, the waste does nothing for you. Instead, it's just there to literally junk up your hand. It's just junk. But with that one, it's interesting how they have the dynamic setup, because in this one, you can choose to pass your turn completely and get rid of all the waste that is in your hand currently. So it's a great way of incorporating rest into your game. It also speeds up the game because as you get into the later portion of the game, the turns go by faster because so many people will be like, oh, I'm gonna pass, I'm gonna pass, I'm gonna pass. So it makes the game go by a little quicker. But the difference between trains and Dominion and Thunderstone is that trains actually uses a board. And so with that one, you're actually building stuff on the board as you are going along. You're building new rails or you're building new station expansions as the game goes on. Other games that use a similar mechanic of using a board but don't use victory points in the same way as the other ones I had listed would be Quest for El Dorado. Quest for El Dorado is a race instead. So this one, you're actually picking up cards, you're choosing which ones to use, and it helps you understand, or the cards that you draw, you're going to utilize to go into different regions across the board. And so that one, since it's a race, it's just the first person to the end. Now there's some bonuses you can pick up on the way that help with tiebreakers, but for the most part, the person who gets to the finish line is the winner. A whole different genre that deck building is used for is cooperative play. So far I've only described the competitive play deck builders. And those are ones where the person with the most victory points or the person who gets to the end wins. Cooperative play games, there's a couple of these. For example, I think most or all the Legendary series are in this category. Also, Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle is another one in this series where you are all working together. Usually in these cases, your hand represents your knowledge as a hero. And so as you are defeating villains, you can usually also buy new abilities or cards or items to be able to use on your future turns to help fight villains. These usually also have an aspect of being able to heal or aid other people that you are playing with or yourself. And so you have the ability of healing and aiding. We really like these ones because thematically it makes a lot of sense where you're actually, taking charge of what you are actually doing. Now there's a whole bunch of two-player versions of deck builders in this genre as well. The biggest ones would probably be Star Realms and Hero Realms. These are smaller games. They're just quick battling games where instead of going for victory points, instead of going for a race, you are directly battling against the other players, and it's kind of a king of the hill where you want to be the last person standing at the end of it. But other games that use this in a different way that we've that we've just recently found out and that we use for our homeschooling is the Undaunted series. In Undaunted, both of you have a deck and you are taking on the role of either the Americans or the Germans, and in this case it's Normandy and it's Normandy Beach. So you are playing with and you buy the different troops that you want to be able to bring into the battle. And actually you're just stuck with the current troops that are available during that particular battle series. But it's another way of using deck building in a different aspect. And so deck building can be used in multiple ways, and multiple different places use it. Sometimes they'll even use them in very small ways. It'll be a very small aspect to the overall game. But it's good to know the basic premise of deck building. And that's why we've been doing these game mechanics class. So that way, hopefully, when you go out and you buy a new game, and if it has a deck building element, you understand better how to utilize it. So what is your favorite deck building game? If you have one, have you tried any deck building games? Let us know in the comments below. Otherwise, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time for worker placement games.